Hi there everybody, it's Martin Twycross, here with another video short, bringing you practical down-to-earth teachings on mediumship and development. So in today's video, I want to talk to you about timing of private sittings. How long should private sittings be? And within that I want to get into professional sittings, where you're charging for your sittings, and also exchange sittings, practice sittings, if you're in development as a medium. Also want to talk a little bit about as well the different types of sitting, and also talk about some practicalities of doing sittings with the timing of it. So if that sounds of interest, stay with me. Okay, so how long should sittings be? Let's look at the timing of sittings. Now, I'm talking about mediumship sittings today, not psychic sittings, although some of what I say does carry over to psychic sittings. I'm primarily talking about mediumship sittings. And also, when I say the word sitting, I can also say the word reading. It is the same, it is the equivalent. At different times during this video, I might start talking about readings as well as sittings. They mean the same thing. Different areas use it with different words. I tend to use sitting the most, but I'm bound to use reading as well. So let's talk about different types of sittings. So I'm talking about a UK perspective because I'm based in the UK. Most of my experience is in the UK. And so I'm looking as well from UK churches, centres, teaching institutions. So in the UK, we have what we call mini readings or taster readings. A number of churches and centres offer those on their open days. They offer them to people to give them a taster of what mediumship is about. So they generally last somewhere between 10 to 20 minutes, maybe 15 minutes. And something else we have within our churches in the UK, I don't know if that happens anywhere else in the world, is what we call psychic suppers. I don't know why we call them psychic suppers, because usually it's mediumship, but so they are a spirit supper, also known as a spirit supper. And it's a meal within the church, but each table is assigned a medium, and the medium does a reading for everyone on the table. There may be 6, 7, 8 people on the table, and the readings generally last about 10 minutes. So you're working around the table doing a sequential 10-minute reading for every person. Then we have what we call the private reading proper, private sitting proper, which generally most private sittings last 30 to 60 minutes. And then we have where students developing mediums will offer exchange and practice sittings to either other students or to family and friends, etc. And generally practice sittings, they last 10 to 30 minutes. So I'm going to talk about what affects the length in a moment and get into much more detail on all of that. So the length of a private sitting. So often the length is set. You have no control over the length of a sitting. Often it's set by a church or a centre or a teaching centre institution. They set their sittings, maybe 30-minute sittings. That's the most common. In the UK, churches, centres, teaching centres, often they do book 30-minute sittings. They're the most common. So you may have no control over the timing. You're doing a 30-minute sitting. That's what you're booked for. 30-minute sittings back to back. I've done 5, 6 30-minute sittings back to back at different churches, centres. It's not uncommon. But in terms of if you have control over the length of the sitting, then factors that affect it is your level of experience. Are you quite new to it? Are you beginner stroke intermediate? Or are you more intermediate advanced? Have you been doing it for a long time? That will determine how long you can work. It will determine what you're comfortable with. The longer you've been in development, the more you've built your power, the longer you can work for. Power is the fuel for mediumship. Power sustains the connection to spirit. So the more power you've got, the longer you can work. So that will determine how long you're comfortable working with. The type of sitting, as I say, if it's a mini sitting, a taster sitting, those timings affect you. Also, the length of sitting is how much you're charging for your sittings and what kind of sittings you offer. Some mediums offer 30-minute sittings, some offer 45-minute sittings, some offer 60-minute sittings, some offer a menu. You can pay this amount of money for a 30-minute sitting or this amount of money for a 60-minute sitting. You choose the length of time of your sitting. But if we're looking at paid sittings, professional sittings, where the medium is charging the going rate for their sitting, then for me 10 minutes is way too short. 20 minutes again is not really enough time to get into it with a sitter. So the minimum I would expect for a paid professional sitting is 30 minutes. 45 minutes is very common as well. I personally do a 45-minute reading. I'll talk a little bit more about why in a moment. But I tend to work on a 45-minute sitting personally. That's what I'm more comfortable with in terms of giving what I want in a sitting. And some mediums I know do 60 minutes. 60 minutes is not uncommon. But for me, 60 minutes really should be the maximum for a private sitting with mediumship. So, some mediums also as well say it should take as long as it takes. We shouldn't be putting a time limit on a reading with spirit. It takes as long as it takes. Person turns up, I work with them, it lasts as long as it lasts. If it's 30 minutes, it's 30 minutes. If it's an hour, it's an hour. If it's an hour and a half, it's an hour and a half. Now that has a problem. If somebody books a sitting with you and their friend got an hour and a half and they only get 30 minutes, they might go away exceptionally disappointed. And also, if you're a medium who has to book multiple readings on the same day, if you're working, say, Wednesday, you book a room and that's your sittings day and you've got a room booked and you're having to book clients in all during the day. If you work as long as it takes and some client is having to wait another 30 minutes for a reading they thought was booked on the hour and you've took them to the half past the hour, they're not going to be happy. So if you only do one sitting a day from your own home, you can do that. I accept you can do that. But if you're working more frequently than that, it gets complicated and it's not so easy to do. And most professional mediums I know do not do that. They specify a fixed time and they work to it. So that's the next point, clear expectations. The sitter should know how long the sitting's going to last and they should know how much you're charging. And that should be explained to them at the time of booking. It should be explained again at the beginning of the reading how long the reading is for. So, okay, so you booked a 30-minute reading with me, or you booked a 45-minute reading with me. So just so they're clear, that's really good. Now, one thing you'll commonly encounter when you're doing sittings and charging for them is people will ask to bring other people with them. And sometimes they bring one person with them, sometimes they bring another 2 or even 3. And they try to get 4 sittings for the price of 1. And so what I always do, if someone says, I want to bring somebody else with me, I always explain, well, I can't guarantee where the sitting will go. And it could go to one person dominantly and not the other if you're not family. And even if you are family, that can happen as well. And I also explain as well that if you're booking a 45-minute sitting or an hour sitting and it overruns, I will charge the extra on a pro rata basis, just so they're clear what I'm doing. That's the way I do it. And in the past, I have had people bring, 2 family members with them, and I end up working and it goes to one of them and the others don't really know who it is, and I feel I have to keep working to try and give everybody something, and you can be there 2 hours when the sitting was only meant to take place for 45 minutes. So we learn the hard way that we need to have systems in place to manage these things off. And managing our time is very important. If you're booked to do sittings in a church, in a centre, in a teaching centre, then generally they're booked at fixed times on the hour or the half hour, and you have to stick to it. The next person turns up for the sitting and they're expecting it. If you overrun, it causes problems for the centre. If it overruns, you may end up with no breaks. So it's not good. So I do accept that every now and again there is a need and a sitting will overrun, but it should be an occasional thing, not the exception. Absolutely. So I always recommend as well, when doing sittings, you have a clock or a watch in your line of sight. If it's in your own home, place the clock somewhere in your vision behind where the sitter will be, and then that way you can keep an eye on time subtly. If you're doing it and there is no clock available and you're doing it in a room and you don't have a clock, then you can always place your watch somewhere where you can see it, but you don't want to be too blatantly clock watching. You don't want to be looking at your watch every few minutes saying, okay, is that how long we're at? Because then it feels as if the person, it feels like you're putting them on the clock. It feels as if that you're not invested in the reading. So don't do that. Also, no countdown timers. I once went to a reading where somebody had a countdown timer from 30 minutes, and at 20 minutes it buzzed, and at 5 minutes left it buzzed twice, and you just feel like, oh my God, I'm being timed here. And bang on the hour, alarm will go off, and you'll be thrown out the door. That doesn't feel right. So again, don't do that. Some centres, some churches, some institutions will give you a knock 5 minutes before the end of the sitting to let you know there's 5 minutes left. And that gives you a chance to start to bring the sitting to a close, but you can't rely on that. So I always like to make sure I'm aware of the time. I'll be working, you get into it, but every now and again I'll just glance at the clock so I know where we are time-wise. So when you're booking sittings as well, there's two styles of booking sittings. There's the back-to-back sitting, and many centres, as I say, they book back-to-back sittings. But when you're booking for yourself and your own rooms or your own home, you can book sittings either back-to-back or have a gap in between. And I tend to book 45-minute sittings on the hour. That's what I do. And the reason being is I get a 15-minute gap in between. If I need to overrun by 5, 10 or 15 minutes, it's not the end of the world. I've got that gap, that flexibility to do that. If it takes a little bit longer to finish up and get the person to leave, if they've got a few more questions, it gives the flexibility to do that. But if the sitting works to time, it gives me a little bit of time to prepare myself between sittings if needed. So I feel that I like that flexibility personally. If it works for you, go with that. If it doesn't, you know, if you feel comfortable booking back to back, that's great. But think about the arrangements for one sitter arriving and another going. Because some people don't have a waiting area or a waiting room. And when one person comes, they ring your doorbell or knock on the door and you've got to go and let them in. And where you're going to put them whilst the sitting's taking place. And it's, you know, confidentiality wise, you can't bring them into the same room as the sitter. That's not a good idea. So for me, you've got to make that choice, back to back or have a gap, but think about a waiting room, think about confidentiality. Other practicalities I like to, when a reading's maybe, if it's a 45-minute reading, after half an hour, I will often ask, do you have any questions? Just in case someone might say, I'm desperate to hear from my brother in the spirit world. Is it possible to link with them? And we can try, we can attempt it. And often if that was to happen, I might end up overrunning because, you know, that's the person they most want in the world. So yeah, that's the person we get for them. And then that's who they really want. So yeah, there may be a need to run for a little bit longer. And I know a number of mediums who have problems closing the sitting. They don't like to do it. They don't like, and they let, some mediums I know will allow people to stay there for a lot longer. You know, the person was there for well over an hour. I couldn't get rid of them. And we have to be disciplined, we have to be professional, but we have to be kind. I will often say, okay, it's now time for me to bring the reading to a close and we're coming to the end now, and just let them know that. And, you know, if it's online, if it's in Skype, or if it's in Zoom or on Messenger, then you can say, I've got to go now. And you can, it's easier for you to go because you're in control of leaving the room. But if they are in your home or they're in a room that you rent, then it's a little bit harder. And you have to get them to leave. So often then, you know, I will say it's time, the reading's come to a close now. I hope you enjoyed it. I've got another person coming, so I'm going to have to bring it to a close now. And you know, if there's money to be taken, that's when we'll take the money. And then I will stand up and gently start walking towards the door and they'll get the drift. But you don't want to be too brutal with it. You can't, you know, you can't get your hand behind their back and push them out, no. And you've got to show that care and respect as well. So you've got to get the balance, and it is a balance, and you have to be tactful. So let's come to developing mediums. So with developing mediums, the length of time of sittings is different. If I was doing a class, generally in a class we get people to do exercises for 10 minutes each way, and we give them some time to do feedback with each other as well. And then we come back to the group, and then also people can raise any issues or anything I've seen that the group needs to know about, we can talk about as well. So generally in a group setting, class exercises are generally 10-15 minutes tops. So for less experienced mediums who are going to do sittings, exchange sittings. An exchange sitting is where you work with another student and you work for them and you get some feedback, and then they work for you and they get some feedback. It's an exchange of work, and it's an exchange of feedback. Exchange sittings. If you're less experienced, then I'd recommend you work for 10 to 15 minutes and then stop and then get feedback. But remember, if you haven't developed a huge amount of power, 10 minutes can be a challenge working connected to the spirit world. So 10 to 15 can be, you know, can be a challenge for beginner, intermediate, mediums. If you're more experienced, intermediate to advanced, then 20 to 30 minutes is more realistic, is better. You know, 20 minutes each way with 10 minutes feedback, that will fill an hour. That's pretty common, you know, 20 minutes either way, 10 minutes of feedback each. That's your hour. You can book an hour session out to exchange readings. That's pretty common. But always leave the time for feedback, because the feedback is the very important part of it. I do recommend that people do the vast majority of their training in classes with tutors, in classes that are supervised so you can get help when you need it. If you just do all your practice as exchange sittings, you can learn a lot of bad habits, so I don't recommend that. I recommend, yes, you go to classes, but every now and again you top it up with exchange sittings, practice sittings, but you don't make it the only practice you're getting. So once you progress to a point where you're very consistent within your mediumship and you can get links and you get evidence and it's taken and it's working well, then you can start doing sittings for family and friends. Generally what you would do then is you'd explain to them, I'm a developing medium, I'm still in training, so this is a practice exercise for me, but I'd like you to give me feedback. So you don't charge them generally. The exchange with them is that they're giving you feedback upon what you've done and the evidence. Is it right? Is the information right? Was the message meaningful? All those kinds of things. And if you're doing sittings for family and friends, I recommend you work for 20 to 30 minutes and then get some feedback at the end. Then the next stage, once you've developed beyond that, is we can then start working with the general public. But what you can do then is do what I call reduced price sittings. I myself, when I started working, doing sittings with the public, I charged a lower rate. Say the going rate was £50, I maybe started charging £20, £25. It's kind of like a half price sitting because I'm just fresh out of development. I've got my driving license, I'm fresh out of development, and I'm now starting to work with readings. So let them know that you're offering a reduced price sitting because you're just out of training or you're still in training. Then the next level, of course, is professional sittings where you're charging the going rate. And if you're doing that, then the rate sittings should be 30 to 60 minutes. If you're doing reduced price sittings, 30 minutes is good, 45 minutes is an absolute maximum. So, but when you're doing professional full price sittings, 30 to 60 minutes, whatever you feel comfortable with, like I said earlier. So there you have it. How long should sittings be and the timing of sittings. I hope you found this video useful. I hope it's been beneficial. I hope you got lots from it. If you have, do hit the like button. Do leave me a comment. If you like my teaching and you like my teaching style, do subscribe to the channel. I do release a new video twice a month. And so subscribe to the channel. Check out my other videos. If you want to support me in the channel as well, you can also check out my products, my study program, my courses, my classes. They're available through my website and my store. Links in the description below. You can also make a donation to support the channel. You can buy me a coffee if you found this helpful. And again, there's links in the description below. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you found it beneficial, and I look forward to seeing you again in the next one.